Welcome back, movie lovers, to the movie theater lobby for our second gathering. My name is Brandon.
And I'm Leah.
And here at the lobby, we hope to provide a comfy space for everyone to get together and share insights as we learn the odd little tidbits about the world within, as well as the world behind the scenes of an array of movies. So please, gather your popcorn, your various tasty treats, and perhaps a giant fizzy soda as we discover more about our selected movie for this week. And Leia, what movie is our subject for this episode?
Get Out.
Get Out! Hold on. Before we get started, I'm just going to text our friend really quickly. Leia, you know how we're going out of town after this, and I promised I'd get house sitting set up.
You never did that.
No, I didn't.
You were in charge of that.
I know. Last minute.
That was your job. You had one job.
I forget. I get busy and forget. Absent-minded sometimes.
It's like you're doing a podcast and working full-time or
something like that. Like adult responsibilities, right? But I know I promised you I'd get someone lined up to take care of the house and take care of the animals while we're away. So just a moment. Okay, good. Sent. Good. Now, let's cover
Get Out.
Before we get our synopsis underway, I do want to give a little heads up. Get Out is going to be a difficult one for us to cover without spoilers.
Yes.
For those of you who want to remain spoiler-free, this is kind of your real quick last-minute warning. As much as a brand new podcast like ours can use every single listen and every single download, if you want to avoid the spoilers, just jump ship now. Watch the movie and then come on back.
If you haven't watched it and you want to see it with fresh eyes, then I would leave now. Go watch the movie, but come back because we have some really interesting things to talk about.
We got some great stuff. So with that, let's kind of close out this ramble here and get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got me out here in this creepy, confusing ass suburb. Gosh, so serious though. I feel like a sore thumb out here.
The story opens at night as a black man walks down the street in a rather quiet suburban neighborhood, following directions in an obviously unfamiliar area. Breaking the stillness of the night, a car pulls up beside him. Feeling justifiably creeped out, he decides his destination is not worth whatever trouble might be literally coming his way, and he turns around to go back the way he came. As he crosses the street, he notices the car has stopped and the door is open. He's then attacked from behind and dragged to the trunk of the car. The scene switches and we meet Rose Armitage, played by Allison Williams, who's packing luggage with her boyfriend Chris Washington, played by Daniel Kaluuya. The two have a trip to visit Rose's family so they can meet Chris. He expresses concern about how her family may react to his being a black man since Rose comes from an affluent white family. Rose does her best to assuage him, and eventually he relents. Before leaving, however, Chris sets up house/dog sitting duties with his best friend Rod, played by Lil Rel Howery, who works for the TSA. And that might seem like an odd statement, but it'll all come together. Driving down a forested road, the couple are waylaid by a very overzealous deer, which collides with their car. They report the incident to the police, and the officer on scene takes Rose's license and pushes Chris for his. Rose is offended and expresses that the officer has no reason to need Chris's license as he was not the driver. Chris opts to provide his license anyway so as not to cause any trouble, but Rose persists and insists there's still no cause for the officer to check Chris's license. Eventually, the officer gives in and leaves them on their journey. Finally, Rose and Chris arrive at Rose's family estate, which is large, sprawling, and nestled quietly among a fairly idyllic wooded area with a lake. Clearly, her family has some money.
Yeah, lots of money.
They're greeted by Rose's parents, Dean and Missy. Dean shows Chris around the house, and now we meet Georgina and Walter, two black house servants who live and work with the Armitages, caring for the house and the grounds. At dinner, we meet Jeremy, the final Armitage family member, and Rose's brother. Jeremy steals a lot of the attention at the table, being loud and obnoxious, and even going so far as to poke and prod at Chris.
So uncomfortable.
Super uncomfortable. This is not a dinner I want to be at.
No. Get me out of there.
It went really crazy, really fast. Yeah. So that night later on, after everyone's asleep, Chris gets out of bed to sneak a cigarette because he's a smoker.
He's restless. He's in a place he doesn't sleep.
The evening was very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been asked not to smoke while he's visiting. So he figures maybe he can sneak one while no one's expecting anything. While he's outside before he lights up, he sees Georgina in the window behaving a little oddly, but going about her business still. And then Chris gets the shit spooked out of him as Walter comes barreling through the
right at him.
Lawn directly at him in the middle of the night.
Running as fast as he can.
Yeah,
and then right when he gets to him, just turns and goes the other direction.
Just turns and bolts another direction. Reasonably creeped out, Chris goes back inside. While he's walking through the house, he stumbles across Missy in her office. Super late at night, odd that she'd be there. Missy calls him into the office, and she rightly suspects that Chris had just gone out for a smoke, even though he didn't light up. Missy is a psychiatrist specializing in hypnotism. She claims to have had success solving Dean's prior smoking issue. He no longer smokes and claims it was due to her hypnotism. Asks him to have a seat, and they begin talking. Without his consent, Missy hypnotizes him. During this hypnosis, she forces him to relive a very traumatic past event. And we won't get into what that is just yet, but just know that it's really disturbing for Chris and one of my most favorite scenes in the whole film.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Daniel Kaluuya just knocked it out.
Yeah,
exactly right. The session culminates in Chris being forced into a mental liminal space, which Missy refers to as the sunken place. The next morning, Chris wakes up in bed. He doesn't recall the traumatic aspect of the night before, but he does remember being hypnotized. And while he's creeped out by the whole ordeal, he is semi-thankful that he doesn't have a craving to smoke anymore. So I guess that's something. Later that day, a caravan of additional old, wealthy white people arrive at the Armitage home, and a party of sorts ensues. Chris is introduced to a lot of people. Most of him look him over with an unsettling gaze and generally treat him like a piece of meat rather than a person. Enduring it as best he can, he attempts to form a kinship with the one other rather out-of-place black man who happens to be just about Chris's age. The interaction doesn't go as good as he'd hopes it would.
I think it goes as good as anyone hoped it would.
No, the guy's got another odd behavior about him. Just not behaving the way you would expect, necessarily. And Chris is a little disturbed or put off by it. It also doesn't help that Chris feels like he knows this man from somewhere, but just can't quite put a finger on it. Eventually continuing a conversation with this guy, trying one last time to connect.
He snaps a picture to send it to his friend Rod.
Exactly right. Because he maybe if he doesn't know who he is, maybe Rod will.
Rod might. When
the flash from the camera goes off in the man's eyes, his personality completely changes. This man freaks out and physically and verbally accosts Chris, and he yells at him to get out! Yo, chill, man. Get out! Chill, man. Chill. Which is exactly what we're going to do with this plot now.
Get out.
Get out of this plot. So now that we've gotten people mostly up to the point where the action in this film really begins, Leah, what do you say we get out of this stuffy-ass, creepy-as-hell rich people party and get on to more explanation about this film in general?
Yeah, sounds great.
So let's start taking a look at, let's focus mainly on the three most significant figures that brought this movie to a reality. Aside from the production company, we'll be looking at Jordan Peele, Daniel Kaluuya, and Allison Williams.
Yes.
Everyone else will get touched on as well, but these ones we're going to really focus on mostly. Leah, where do you want to start?
Kind of want to start with the election.
Do you now?
Yeah.
All right. That seems like an odd place to start, but let's do it.
So Jordan Peele actually came up with the idea for this film back when the election between Hillary and Obama.
Oh, and they were in the primaries for the Democratic nomination.
Yep, that. And he had thought about these two different groups of people. So the black people and women, and they're two, racism and sexism are like these two parallel issues.
Yeah, two historically oppressed groups of people.
Yeah. And so he was thinking about like, gosh, who deserves it more?
Right.
Which group has it coming to them? Which group, should have this chance?
Should be exalted.
Should be exalted, yeah. Because really there's no answer to that, right? Like they're both groups that have been historically suppressed, And so he kind of started thinking about these ideas and coming up. He had some other inspirations too. One of his favorite movies is Rosemary's Baby.
Sure.
And he also was looking at the movie The Stepford Wives. And these movies are kind of more about sexism and oppressing women. Paranoia. And Rosemary's Baby being one of his favorite movies. I think that was his biggest inspiration.
Sure.
You know, Rose came from Rosemary.
The Rose name, yeah.
Roman from Roman Polanski, right?
Polanski, yeah.
So he also pulled from a lot of other movies. So there's Silence of the Lambs. He drew some inspiration from that, especially this scene between Chris and Missy. He kind of pulled the Hannibal Lecter scene where he's trying to get into Clarice's head.
Yeah, a mental game.
And the mental game, yeah. He kind of pulled that into the scene with Chris and Missy where Missy's trying to hypnotize him.
Yeah, obvious. Yeah, it's a very kind of in-your-face shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He seems to like older horror movies too, so...
Yeah, classic horror.
Classic horror. He pulled... So the very beginning of the movie you talked about in the plot...
Right,
where
with
he's
the guy walking through the streets.
Yep. He kind of pulled this quote, perfect white neighborhood from the 1978 film Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, obviously.
Mm-hmm. That was one of his inspirations for that opening scene. He also pulled inspiration in style and tone from the British TV series Psychoville.
Oh, I've not seen it.
I haven't seen it either. It's British, so I don't watch a lot of British TV.
Yeah.
But it also starred Daniel Kaluuya as well.
Right. Yeah,
so,
I remember reading his filmography and seeing that in the list.
Yeah, so he pulled all these different kind of things, and he was writing this story, and I don't think he ever really thought the story was going to go anywhere. He was just kind of writing it for himself.
Sure.
And then his best friend, Keegan-Michael Key.
Right.
And if anybody knows who that is, they did a show together called Key and Peele.
Key and Peele, Comedy Central
series.
Fantastic sketch series.
Mm-hmm. He was working on a film with a man named Sean McKittrick called Hell Baby.
Oh, I love
from 2013.
that movie.
Yeah. Such a good one. But he hooked Jordan up with Sean.
Okay.
And Jordan pitched this movie idea that he had to McKittrick because Keegan convinced McKittrick that he had the best idea for a horror film.
And he does.
Yeah. And Jordan was like, I don't know, he's going to love this. I mean, I don't even know what I'm doing. But he pitched this film to him, and he had never heard a story like this.
Yeah. It's quite original.
It's quite original. And it really he really liked the idea. He liked it so much that during that little coffee break that they had together, he hired Peele to write it. And then soon after that, he also got Jason Blum involved from Blumhouse Productions. And I don't know if you know a lot about Blumhouse Productions, but a lot of their movies are kind of in that vein.
Very horror. Yep.
Yeah. So it all kind of, I don't know, he came up with these ideas, and then he's got connections, and then it snowballs into this thing, and he didn't think it would ever get that far. And it just was coming to reality right before his eyes, Yeah,
it's great to see a little passion project like that turn into a reality.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he comes from comedy.
Right.
So he went from comedy to horror, and you would think that's a huge jump. But he's always loved horror.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of comedy is all about your buildup and
the comedic timing.
Your timing, and a lot of horror films are exactly the same way.
Right.
There's this big buildup, and then if you don't time it right, the horror scene's ruined.
Yeah,
You've got to have this perfect timing. He's so good at comedy. So it really just translated into this really great horror film. And we don't want to call it a horror film.
Right.
Because Jordan wouldn't call it a horror film either.
No.
He didn't really consider it horror. He really didn't consider it a psychological thriller. So he termed the phrase social thriller.
Which is a very apt description.
And there's definitely some horror elements in the film. There are definitely some psychological elements and thriller elements in this film. But social thriller really it's a great phrase for this movie.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, to find a better descriptor, I think would be very difficult. Horror thriller, horror psychological thriller, sure, it works. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, that's a much better description.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Peele had always talked about having to act in films. Like he does the Comedy Central thing, and he's done some other acting roles, but he thought that this kind of was going to be doing for the rest of his life was acting. When he got into writing this film, McKittrick had begged him to play the role of Rod.
Oh, wow.
And Peele was like,
Yeah.
I don't think so. And the big thing was that he thought that it would ruin the ambience of the film because people would see him and they would think Key and Peele, and they wouldn't.
It would put a different spin on the whole idea.
It would take people out of the moment. So I think that refusal of playing a role in that film ultimately ended up making him this successful filmmaker that he is today. And that was the moment he decided to make this a career.
Yeah. I had also read along that line where he was really kind of thinking of giving up on acting was when he was trying out for a role in the Emoji Movie, which of course everyone remembers.
The poop.
And he was asked to play the poop emoji.
Yeah, and he's like, this is what it's come to.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So I believe he was already kind of thinking, I'm done with acting at that point. And I mean, I love his acting, great comedic actor.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
But boy, has he found his talent
in
the writing, directing.
Yeah. He did do a little voice in the film.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going to say. Go ahead and lay it on us.
Can I say it?
Say it.
He was the voice of the dying deer.
The overzealous deer that crashed with the car, dying on the side of the road.
So he did lend his voice to the dying deer.
You would never know, but I mean, boy, does he do a good impression of a dying deer.
He does a great dying deer, yeah.
Well, speaking of influences with this film, another horror film that he found as an influence was Night of the Living Dead, the original one.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's due to the fact that it was a very early film to have a black leading man.
Mm-hmm.
And that man survived 99% of that film, which I guess would lead us to our leading man of this film, Daniel Kaluuya. Of course, he played Chris Washington.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in 1989 in London to Ugandan parents.
He has a British accent, yo.
Yeah, he has a British accent, and you would not know with this film. I think there's a few occasions where you can sort of hear it come through.
Yeah,
but for the most part, wow, does he have a really great American accent.
Yeah.
But he's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We
talked about Psychoville.
He's done some stage work, some screen work. Mm-hmm. He even wrote a stage play when he was 9 years old.
Nuh-uh. That's adorable.
And it actually got performed at Hampstead Theatre in London.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But this role, despite all of his previous things, he was in an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah, speaking of which, Jordan actually hired him after seeing that episode.
Oh, really?
The episode was called 15 Million Merits.
Yeah.
And he basically played a British version of Chris.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. Jordan, when he was looking for a role for this, he was looking for a subdued, kind, well-meaning character, but also a character that could explode on screen when needed. And dude, you couldn't have found a better man for the job.
Yeah, he fits so well in this role.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had also read along those lines that when he was called in for audition, he was given a scene to read, and they didn't say which one specifically, but they did allude to the fact that it was a scene in which he had to cry on demand.
Oh my gosh.
So I can only assume it was the reaction to the hypnotism scene that he was doing in audition. Jordan Peele had said that Daniel had done the scene 5 times. He did a read 5 times.
Every time it was the perfect cry.
Every time. He cried a single tear at the exact same moment every time. So this guy, he's got a talent to make himself cry on demand, which I don't know how that happens.
It really sells that one scene where he's crying. Yeah.
Yeah, he really, I could never do that in a million years. But Daniel Kaluuya, even after this film, has done a few other things. He's gotten a lot of awards, a lot of nominations.
He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in Get Out.
Yes, and he won that particular award. He got 2 BAFTA awards. He got a Golden Globe.
All deserved.
All deserved. He's very accomplished. And he even went on to star in Jordan Peele's 3rd film, Nope.
Oh, and he was so good in that one too.
Which was also really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like Jordan Peele sold the film.
Yeah.
But Daniel Kaluuya sold the film.
Yeah, he couldn't have picked a better actor for that.
Talking about Daniel Kaluuya, we would be remiss if we don't mention his counterpart in this film, Allison Williams.
Yeah, it's like yin and yang.
who obviously is his girlfriend in the film, played Rose Armitage. Allison also has an amazing
a gift
skill at her acting in this film.
It's unnerving.
We
don't want to talk too much about it because it'll give away some things. But
there's some sequences where she pulls off some acting tricks, and man, they really hit you good.
Really creepy.
Yes.
So unnerving.
She also has been around for a little while. She's the daughter of Brian Williams, who's a news anchor, or was a news anchor for a long time. She went to school at Yale, so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, smart girl.
I would not have gotten into Yale. But her kind of most notable role, aside from Get Out, was a long stretch on the TV series Girls.
Where she plays a woman named Marnie.
Yeah.
It's an HBO show.
Yeah. Yeah, I never did get around to watching much of that one, but
she was a main character, and it was around for 5 years.
And it was pretty acclaimed for its run as well.
Yeah, and I watched a few clips. I'm like, I should watch that. It sounds like it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I've heard it was a really good, entertaining show.
Yeah. I heard that Jordan actually had chosen her because she gives off kind of this air of trust. And it's not just from her role as Marnie, but also because she played Peter in Peter Pan, which was it was Peter Pan Live.
Right.
I don't know if you watched any clips of that.
I didn't know.
She can sing.
Can she?
Yes.
Oh, she got a voice on.
Oh, she has the most angelic voice. But she plays Peter Pan in that, and it kind of, of course you trust Peter Pan, and Peter Pan is sweet, carefree.
Take it to Neverland.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
So he really wanted to pick somebody that kind of gave this air of trust and, sweetness.
Did she get to fly on stage?
I didn't see that much of it. I
hope she did.
Yeah. No, right. On those little strings.
Yeah. If you're going to get to play Peter Pan and you don't get to fly, then you got ripped off.
You know what I loved about that is that before I went into that, I thought she played
Tinkerbell.
I thought she played Tinkerbell. I'm like, she had to play Tinkerbell.
Or Wendy.
Yeah, or Wendy. No, she's Peter Pan.
Peter Pan. That's awesome.
Yes.
I love it.
I know. I loved it too.
Way to go, Allison.
Yeah.
Way to get that role.
Yeah, she's been in some more recent things too, but she was in a movie called Megan.
Oh, yeah.
From 2022.
Killer doll.
Yeah, she plays the caretaker to her orphaned 8-year-old niece. So she's got a major role, but it's not like the major role, but she's in it a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, she had Get Out, and really, that's all you need.
That's all you need.
It's a great movie. I believe we mentioned how Daniel had won some awards. I believe Jordan had gotten some awards as well for this film.
Yeah, he won the Oscar.
I'm playing coy there, but yes, obviously.
The Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
Right.
Which I think is interesting. He said he confessed to writing more than 200 drafts of the film before coming up with the script that he used for final production.
Lot
200 drafts.
Boy.
And you also got to think about it's kind of extra funny because, and I think it's funny that it's funny because he's a comedian too, but it's kind of extra funny because a lot of the film was improvised.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So he won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. And yes, it was an original screenplay, but a lot of it was improvised just because you've got comedians. And
I would expect if you're on a Jordan Peele film, I would expect he's going to insist on a lot of improv.
Your screenplay's an outline at this point.
Yeah. Jordan Peele, he's got some great improv talent. So, of course, he's going to want to see that in the people he's directing.
It's the 6 horror films to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. And those include The Exorcist, Jaws, Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, and Black Swan.
Huh. And
of those 6, the only one that's actually ever won was Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it's included in, there's only been 6 quote-unquote horror films that have been nominated for Academy Awards for Best Picture.
Some elite company right
there. And that's recent, And those are all relatively old. I think Black Swan, 2010 Black Swan came out.
Really new.
That one was the newest one, Yeah,
it's not often that horror films get nods in the Academy Awards. So good for this movie. Way to go, Get Out.
Yeah.
Well, of course, awards lead into just general acclaim. So, when this movie was released, for the most part, it got really high marks from critics. Like high 80s, mid 90s, nearly across the board. There were a few holdouts on those, and some critics who gave it really unjustifiably negative reviews.
Like the Rotten Tomatoes one. Did you read about that one?
No.
So the Rotten Tomatoes had 100%. Rotten Tomatoes score.
Sure.
For a long time. And then this guy named Armand White from National Review spoiled the review. So there's only 3 reviews at the time, and he put in his review and spoiled the review. And so now it was, I'm sure it's different now, but at the time it hung at like 99% forever because of this one guy, who thought he knew better. I'm going to go ahead and say Armand White is one of those guys who, when you meet him, he's like, nothing's 100%.
Right, of course.
Nobody's perfect. That's the
yeah.
kind of guy he is.
Yeah, that's likely.
But McKittrick had said that Universal cut together a trailer and put it out during the BET Awards. And in 12 hours, it got 25 million views.
Wow.
So
that's
was
impressive.
They hadn't even really formally put anything together yet. They just wanted to kind of get it out there, see what
the general audience is feeling.
Yeah, what the feeling would be. And that within 12 hours, 25 million views.
Well, I mean, it makes sense when you look at the fact that this film had a budget of $4.5 million and it brought in $255 million worldwide. So obviously the audiences loved what they were getting.
It's the second highest grossing horror film in 2016.
Yeah, deservedly so.
Deservedly so. Blum figured everyone who likes horror movies probably saw this movie because you like horror movies, you're going to go see a horror movie. But because of the kind of subject matter of the film, he felt there's a whole other group of people that went to see it, not just for the horror, but for other aspects of the film, which also leads to the success. And of course, during the time with the election and the political climate and the race climate, like, it was just the perfect storm for this movie to have all the success.
Yeah. Just a lot of tension in the air. Absolutely. It was speaking a message that people wanted to talk about, but I think weren't comfortable talking about out loud at the time.
No, and he did it in a way, and I think that's one of the things he even mentions is that, like the movie Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, they touch on subjects that aren't comfortable to talk about.
Right.
But you can watch it and it's entertaining and you get something from it when you watch it. And I think that's kind of what he accomplished with this film too, is that he really wanted a film where he could touch on all these really sensitive subjects, but also still make it entertaining. And when you leave that movie, you start thinking about things like, what the hell did I just watch?
Right.
And really start delving into your mind on that.
And Jordan had even said on a few occasions that while the movie does have an overt commentary on racism, he intended for the audience, whether you're black, white, brown, whatever, he wanted the audience to feel like they were Chris. Like Chris is the
and you
analog
get the sense
on the screen for you.
Absolutely. Which is why you're so uncomfortable the entire freaking film.
He wanted everybody to be able to feel the discomfort, the justified or not paranoia, the uneasy bigotry, the casual and sometimes overt racism. He wanted to Get Out to be purposeful, to bring people together rather than divide them, to give them all a feeling of, God, doesn't this suck?
One of the kind of interesting things about Peele's background in comedy is that he also realizes there are some horror thriller films kind of lose their audience, kind of with those classic corny horror tropes that you see.
I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah. So like an example, someone going up the stairs instead of out the front door. Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Why aren't you just getting out?
Yeah, get out the door.
Get out. So that's kind of where that film title comes from.
Shout at the screen.
Shouting at the screen, get out, He also felt it was important to make comedic relief in the film be from more like real life moments instead of being forced. So I think his background in comedy helps him with these these corny horror tropes and some of the kind of corny comedic relief that you find in some of these horror films. He makes it so much better. Yeah,
to make it, like you said, make it feel more natural rather than just a forced, here's a funny guy in the middle of this horror situation.
Yeah. He does a really good job of making that not so forced.
I like the way he did that in the fact that he used Rod as a lot of the comic relief. And while he was somewhat involved in the overall horror of it, he was distanced because he was not in that location. He wasn't at the scene of the horror. So he's reacting from an outside perspective, and that's where the comedy.
And it's real life. Like that's how you be on the other phone. Like,
how you're not scared of this, man? Look, they could have made you do all types of stupid shit. They have you fucking barking like a dog, flying around like you're a fucking pigeon, looking ridiculous, okay? Or, I don't know if you know this, white people love making people sex slaves and shit.
But kind of as you were mentioning with the shouting at the screen, the get out, there's another aspect kind of laid throughout the whole film that is meant to give that idea of get out to Chris specifically. The kind of theme song for the movie, Shikliza Kwa Wahenga.
Yeah, I wasn't going to attempt that one. Good job.
Thank you. It was written by a composer, Michael Abels. And it's a Swahili language. When it's roughly translated to English, it's saying roughly, listen to the ancestors, run. You need to run far, listen to the truth, save yourself. So the whole time, that's the song's in the opening of the film. It's played over top some of the more dramatic sequences. It's like ancestors trying to tell Chris, just get out. So I think the music was so well put together.
So Michael Abels had never worked on a film before this.
Oh, really? What had he done before?
So Jordan Peele actually found one of his orchestral compositions called Urban Legends on a YouTube video.
Oh, no kidding.
And from that YouTube video, he decided, quote, this guy could terrorize some people in this movie. That's what he thought.
Yeah. The music was really creepy.
Yeah, so it was kind of like his score debut, you know. There's also another song in there called Run, Rabbit, Run. It was played a couple times throughout the film.
Yeah.
It was written by British composer Noel Gay, which isn't important, but it's important, but it's not that important.
Right.
But his birth name is actually Reginald Armitage.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Yep. His name was Reginald Armitage.
The connections just fly.
The song was actually performed by a duo called Flanagan and Allen in 1939. So it's a really old song.
Yeah.
The song was kind of popular during World War II. But the duo changed the lyrics to Run, Adolf, Run.
Oh, right.
To mock the Nazis. So I feel like that also makes the song just that much more poignant.
More kind of fitting.
You know?
Yeah. When it's played in the opening of the film, when the man who's walking in the dark neighborhood gets abducted and taken to the trunk of the car, the man who's abducting him is wearing a knight's helmet. Which seems really weird, and you're wondering why. It's never really necessarily brought up or relayed what the hell the helmet's all about, other than just obviously trying to obscure
Hide
this
your
man's his identity. Originally, and this is going to come with a little bit of a spoiler here, originally it was conceived by Jordan Peele that the Armitage family and the other assorted rich white people that you see later on all had some previous connection to the Knights Templar.
Oh, okay.
And that event, at some point in time, their group as it stands now had splintered from the Knights Templar, and they were looking to find a way to, I guess, succeed at a version of immortality. And
That's
I guess
about as far as you should go on that one.
So we're going to end it there. So
we'll come back to that.
That's a little connection there to that whole concept. So
we had talked about the sunken place. And I think we're moving out of talking about characters now and more into some of the world stuff.
Yeah, let's get into some other stuff.
Because this is a little different. Some of this world stuff connects to the characters in kind of a hodgepodge kind of way. So I know we were talking about the scene with Missy and Chris where she's hypnotizing him and this place called the Sunken Place.
One of my favorite scenes, yes.
Yeah. It's the scene where he cries on cue.
Man, powerful.
So good.
So good.
They were trying to figure out a way to get that to like feel real on screen. So they have it on paper, but how do you make it like look real?
It's an odd thing to envision.
Yeah, and it's something I've never thought about. So you watch a movie and you're like, you just take it for granted.
Yeah, of course.
The cinematographer, his name's Toby Oliver. He used this technique called dry for wet. And it's used for underwater scenes. It was used a lot in the James Cameron film, The Abyss.
Okay, yeah, I like that movie too. What film don't I like, apparently?
Right? So it's a concept where you shoot a dry stage and then you use lots of smoke and you do it in slow motion. And then you can add like light to refract the smoke, make it look like there's ripples in the water.
Boy, that's creative.
Yeah. And so they did that and they used that so they didn't have to use any special effects.
Sure.
They just didn't use the smoke. So it was slow motion and, they used wind. So he looked like he was sinking, but it wasn't in water.
Yeah,
it was in his mind.
It gave it that real effect without necessarily having to throw everything into like computer generation.
Yeah.
Now, sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Yeah, so you get a sense that he's sinking into his mind, not, in water or anything like that. But also the sunken place is a metaphor that Jordan Peele described as a term that Black people are marginalized.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, no matter how hard we scream, the system silences us.
Yeah.
That was a direct quote from Jordan. So it was also a metaphor for the way that Black people feel in society.
Right.
Their voices aren't heard.
Yeah, really oppressed and pushed down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's some other symbology in the film I thought was really interesting. And they're things you wouldn't think about unless you read about it or you just happen to take special care and notice.
Of course.
But during that scene as well, she's hypnotizing him and she uses a teacup and a spoon.
Yeah, super unconventional. Usually you think of pocket watches.
Yeah, that's exactly what he says in the film, right?
You just dangle a pocket watch in front of people's faces. Is that it?
So she's using a spoon and a cup, and the spoon is a silver spoon.
Of course it is.
So that kind of is a metaphor for privilege.
Privilege and wealth,
And wealth.
Wealth, upbringing, yeah.
Yep. There's also an eerie scene where they're doing an auction.
Oh,
and we
yeah.
won't describe exactly what the auction is about yet, but they're holding up like bingo cards.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with racism. When you were trying to buy a slave,
right.
you would use like a number or a bingo card.
Yeah.
So they used that as kind of a metaphor for that. There's also another scene where Rose is drinking milk.
Yeah, kind of. She's eating some Fruit Loops.
And drinking milk.
Separately, not together.
Not together.
I mean,
she's
consuming
eating
them both at the same time.
a Fruit Loop and then drinking a drink of water or milk. Yeah. But there's some talk that maybe that milk symbolizes purity, white supremacy, because milk is kind of, milk and honey. It's kind of like symbolizes that, I guess.
Yeah.
There's also another scene where he is sitting in an armchair.
Yeah.
And he's in the sunken place and he's scraping at the chair and he's pulling what looks like cotton out of the chair. The cotton filling out of the chair. And that's symbolic of that history of
Black slavery,
cotton picking. And so that was symbology that was purposely put in the film for that reason.
Yeah. I know there's also significance to the symbolism of deer. So back in the days of American slavery, buck was a term often used for a Black male. And of course, there's a deer they hit with their car. And they mentioned that to Rose's parents. And Dean, Rose's father, says,
No, I don't mean to get on my high horse, but I'm telling you, I do not like the deer. I'm sick of it. They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem. I see a dead deer on the side of the road. I think to myself, that's a start.
Kind of giving an underlying tone of maybe what his genuine feelings are.
Yeah.
But aside from that, and this is going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory here, when the deer is hit by the car, Rose, it kind of slides right off her back. Doesn't really care. But Chris is really distraught by the whole situation.
Gets out of the car. And when you're watching too, you're like, why is he even getting out of
why is he caring so much? But the traumatic event that Missy's hypnotism forced him to relive was that when Chris was young, he was at home alone while his mother was out, expecting her to return. And he was watching TV. It was a rainy night, and she was really late. She was not home on time. And rather than be concerned about it, Chris just sat and continued to watch TV.
He was concerned, but he didn't know what to do.
Right, yeah.
Or he didn't want to.
And young Chris eventually found out that his mother had been hit by a car and died on the side of the road.
And she was alive when she had been hit, and that if he had gone to her, he may have been able to save her.
Right. So
that's why he gets out.
The deer is, kind of an analog to that. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, there's another time that we see a deer toward the end of the film where Chris is in that chair you had mentioned, and there's a stuffed deer head above the TV. And he's being forced to watch this TV but he doesn't want to sit and watch the TV. He wants to actively do something. So it's another kind of parallel between him sitting and watching the TV and doing nothing while his mother or the deer is dying and spurring to action. There is one more instance of a deer analogy, but maybe we'll save that for a bit later on in the episode.
Okay. Is it a spoiler?
It is.
Okay.
It is very much so.
So, you know, the last name Armitage has got some interesting history to it
Sure.
that I found was worth mentioning, especially for you.
Uh-oh.
But it's an homage to the 20th century horror writer H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's the last name of the protagonist in Lovecraft's story, the Dunwich Horror.
Yes.
Kind of a spoiler, but the Armitages aren't the nicest people.
Right.
You kind of get a sense that's probably what's going to happen. But the use of this name kind of reflects, you know, elements in this Lovecraft story.
Yeah.
And I think it says that it was a decadent New England family tied to the occult. It had a lot to do with
kind of
that story.
A creeping horror running across the countryside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovecraft was also notoriously racist against Black people.
He was,
so that was also another reason why the name Armitage was used.
Yeah, he's incredibly influential for horror. He was not a nice guy.
No.
I mean, he was nice to his white friends. Let's just say that. But not really a man who was gracious with anybody not so white.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of those situations where you kind of have to hate the man, but appreciate the work he did, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The editor, Gregory Plotkin,
Okay.
he had mentioned in an interview that one of the best things or one of the favorite things about the film was Jordan's attention to allowing everybody to have their own moment in the film.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we talked about a few of the characters, but every single character had a moment. You know, the brother, what was his name? Jeremy had that moment in the dining room.
Yeah.
The father has his moment with the tea and with the fireplace.
Yeah.
Mom, Missy, has her moment with the hypnotism.
Yeah.
They all have these little moments in the film, and he thought that was really quite brilliant of Peele because he didn't spend a lot of time on all the characters, but you do get a sense of who they are, and you kind of get to get inside their heads a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It gives you more perspective into each character rather than just having somebody say or behave outright wacky. I'm the wacky horror guy, or I'm the jock. You know, you don't get that stereotypical trope. You just get a multifaceted character.
Yeah, well, that was really interesting.
Well, one of the characters that tends to get quite a bit of screen time, even though he's not entirely directly related, is Rod. I just kind of want to put a little focus on him for a minute, just because I think all of the actors in this film deserve at least a quick moment, just as Jordan gave them all their own scenes. So he also appeared in a movie called Judas and the Black Messiah, in which he starred with Lakeith Stanfield, who played Andre in Get Out.
Oh, okay.
And Daniel Kaluuya was also in that film.
Yeah,
so
I remember
those guys
that.
all kind of stayed together there. And this was mostly considered the breakout role for Lil Rel as well.
He was so good. You would think he'd been doing this forever.
Yeah, I know he's had...
He's comedian, right?
Yeah, he's had a comedian life before this, and he does it well. I mean, he's a funny guy, especially in this film. In a film where it's really uncomfortable the whole way through, he gives you that opportunity to laugh and release a little bit.
I'm TS motherfucking A. We handle shit. That's what we do. Consider this situation. Fucking handle.
There's a scene where Rod and Chris are talking on the phone.
Yes.
I read that they were both actually talking on the phone.
Oh, right.
But Jordan was on the other line.
Oh,
so he was
as
playing.
the stand in between.
Yeah. So he'd play like Rod or he'd play Chris for each of them. So a lot of Rod's lines are improvised.
Yeah.
But it was really just them talking over the phone, which probably made it more comfortable for him to feel like he could improvise a lot of that.
That's a genius way of doing it.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I did too. Because they're actually talking to someone. It's not fake, you know?
Right, yeah. It's not just, I'm pretending to talk and listening to nothing on the other end of the line.
Yeah, everything
They're
was...
getting to respond. Well, since we had mentioned Lakeith Stanfield in reference to Lil Rel, Lakeith also He's been in films such as Uncut Gems, Knives Out, and of course, as I mentioned before, Judas and the Black Messiah. So, I mean, he's also got a pretty good notoriety to him as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was someone else who had a wee connection there. Oh, right. Betty Gabriel.
Oh,
who
right.
played Georgina.
Yes.
She's most recognizable for this role, in my opinion, I think. But she was also in the really fun action sci-fi movie Upgrade, which, if you haven't seen that yet, please go check that out.
That one's a good one, yeah.
But she was also in The Purge election year.
Oh.
And Lakeith Stanfield was in The Purge Anarchy.
Oh.
So
they were both in a Purge movie.
Kind of a little connection there between the bunch.
Another Blumhouse film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yep. Kind of keeping it all right in that family.
Notice they do that. Production companies do that a lot.
Yeah. They're able to, I think, have a working relationship with a lot of actors that way.
You know, another actor that one of my favorites was Bradley Whitford.
Oh, right, yeah.
And really the biggest reason he's one of my favorite actors in this film is because of his work on Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, okay.
One of my favorite shows of the last probably, 10 years.
Yeah, and I'm ashamed to admit I haven't watched it.
It's okay. It's it's another one of those women's lib type films about how the country in the future goes to hell and women are treated like second-class citizens to the point where we're slaves, basically.
Another form of oppression. Yeah.
Another form of oppression. But he plays he plays a man that's on the bad side but doing good work.
Kind of taking the thing down from the inside.
Yeah, where he's on the inside, but he's helping these women as best he can with what he's got. But he's also been in Cabin in the Woods. Years and years ago, he played opposite Elizabeth Shue as the sleazy boyfriend in Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, right.
It's kind of, I think, where he got his big start.
Yeah.
But Peele chose Bradley for the role of Dean Armitage because of his prior role as Josh Lehman in The West Wing.
Oh, The West Wing, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was in that for a really long time.
Yeah, a long run.
Peele wanted all of the Armitage family members to have the distinct white liberal feel. And that's in quotes. I didn't say that.
Right.
Distinct, quote, white liberal feel to them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the reasons why he picked Bradley for that role.
I can see that for sure.
The whole, if I could have elected Obama again.
If I could have voted for Obama for a third term,
I would have done it. Yeah.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
I agree.
Yeah.
Bradley Whitford's counterpart in this film as well, Catherine Keener. Bradley Whitford played Dean, by the way, and Catherine Keener plays Missy. She also has been around for quite some time, but I guess kind of a very notable film that she's been in that has some similarities on a kind of basic level to Get Out, as odd as it sounds, being John Malkovich. Yeah, so she's got another long list of
good films
work that she's done as well. And I mean, I don't want to leave out Marcus Henderson either, as we had mentioned and talked a lot about films that deal with oppression and that as well. Marcus Henderson doesn't have the in fact, he probably has the smallest actor list on this group, but he did have a very small part in the movie Django Unchained. So.
And he played who in this film?
In this film, he played Walter.
Oh, okay.
So another kind of smallish role, but very important, obviously.
And Walter was the groundskeeper.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, one of the groundskeeper, the guy that was mowing the lawn with a push mower.
With a push mower and trying to rake the entire estate with a hand rake.
Yeah.
And the guy who was running at Chris in the middle of the night.
Yes, okay.
Well, I should get back to work and mind my own business.
Well, now that we kind of touched on the remaining cast there, at least the main significant cast, I wanted to point out another scene that I felt was very poignant to the film, because I had kind of a similar thought after I had read this little exchange. There was a mention by Jordan Peele that the only scene that Daniel Kaluuya had a really hard time with getting in a mental space for, there's a point where Chris has kind of had it.
Okay.
With being here. And it's just after he's told to get out.
Okay, yep.
And he and Rose walk to the lake and they have kind of just a conversation together. And he says, let's just leave. Let's just go right now. Let's go.
And he couldn't figure out why Chris wouldn't
You're right.
just leave.
Daniel couldn't understand why Chris just wouldn't leave without Rose, why he wouldn't just go. Jordan explained to him that Chris is in a mindset of, after what happened with his mom, he wanted to believe he's the kind of man who wouldn't abandon family, who wouldn't just give up.
And Rose's family.
And Rose had become family to him after their time dating. So he didn't want to just leave and become that man that he didn't want to be. So he chose to instead stay and convince Rose that when she was ready to leave, and she sort of would give him the idea, okay, let's just kind of wrap up what we're doing and then we'll leave. So he conceded. So after Daniel had gotten that explanation from Jordan, he finally got into the right headspace for the scene, and obviously he very much nailed that scene as well.
Yeah, headspace is so important.
Yeah, it really is.
There's another scene, and I'm going to go into more detail about it later, but there's another scene where he's asking Rose to find the keys.
Let's just jump into spoiler territory right now.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So last opportunity for anyone who sat through any of the spoilers we've already given. If you don't want to hear any more, like you're putting your foot down.
I've heard enough.
This is
I feel like I've been spoiled enough.
Brandon and Leah, you've ruined my ears and my eyes enough. Yeah, so this is your chance to get out.
Get out.
Sex slave! Oh, shit! Chris, you gotta get the fuck up out of there, man. You in some high, wide shut situation. Leave, motherfucker!
Okay, I think I see that. Okay, there's one leaving. Just one.
Just
That's
one.
not bad.
That's not bad.
Okay.
You guys are...
The rest of you are pretty cool.
Yeah, okay.
Now let's talk about the one who left. Boy, what a jerk. Okay, no, let's not do that. Okay, so now please resume the key.
The key scene. Yeah, so there's a scene where Rose is told to get the keys, and she's searching for them, and she can't find them anywhere. They're in the bedroom, and she's looking in her bag. He's like, you can't find them, and you can feel that he's like...
His panicking,
but he's trying to be calm because he knows that she's trying to help him, and, she's looking for the keys, and she can't find them any faster than she's trying to find them. So he's trying to stay calm, but you can tell there's like...
Yeah, there's tension building.
Yeah, and so she like leaves the room to see if she can find the keys somewhere else. And when she leaves the room, you hear like a click and like a ring, and it's a door. And you look over and the door to her attic space or crawl space is open. And so he goes in there and he finds all these pictures of Rose with all of these other Black men. Some of these Black men are familiar.
Yeah.
They're Black men that he's seen or that he knows have been missing. They're the guy that he snapped the picture of and sent to Rod. Turns out that guy was somebody they actually did know, and he disappeared. So these like weird things are happening. And so, of course, suddenly the panic starts to set in.
Even more so.
And he goes down the stairs to find Rose, ask her where the keys are. She's still looking in her bag and looking for the keys. During this whole scene, I guess the whole crew kind of were having a hard time getting into the character for this, like trying to figure out how we were going to reveal it and then reveal it again. Because you've already revealed it. He knows.
Yeah.
But now he's going downstairs and he knows. They don't know that he knows.
Yeah.
But do they? So like there's this like odd moment. And so it's just, it was hard for them to like really figure this out. They needed to wrap the scene in one day and didn't have time to rehearse with the actors as Peele normally does. So that also had some
building tension.
Yeah. Peele told them they had to trust that the rising tension and the release would work in the completed film. And he told Daniel to act out his frustration in the scene in that character. So that frustration that you can palpably see and feel is literally him frustrated because he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, this is, what am I doing?
Let's get the scene going.
Like, he's so frustrated.
Rose.
I don't know where they are.
Rose? Rose! Rose, give me those keys! Rose, give me those keys. Rose, now! Now, the keys!
Peele is quoted with saying that's like the first time he ever felt like a real director because the whole cast trusted his process and just did what he asked them to do. And it was such a success because when she reveals the keys, it was like suddenly like a light clicks or like a switch goes on and they're all different people.
Yep.
Just like that.
Yeah, it was
nuts.
An incredible change.
Yeah.
Just in a moment.
That whole scene was it was hard for them to film, but it worked because they all trusted Peele's process.
Yeah. Yeah. He really found the motivation for everybody in that scene. And I hear the same statement a lot where if your actors and your crew don't have trust in you as a director, you won't be a successful director.
It won't be believable.
But the fact that they were able to give him that trust and he helped them pull it off.
He was so proud of them for trusting him, and it just worked so well.
And
so
he should be proud that he had such a great cast who was able to work with that. I mean, that is talent on their part. That's super admirable.
Yeah. So, we were talking earlier too about Marcus Henderson, who played Walter, the groundskeeper. I think it's interesting to point out that Peele explicitly put things like that hand mower and the rake and the weird running scenes and stuff. He literally put those in there specifically because they were nonsensical.
Right.
Because it really pointed to the fact that something was off.
Yeah. That bit of off is that
his consciousness is actually Roman Armitage.
Yeah. That
he's Grandpa.
Yeah, he's Grandpa Armitage in that man's body. Mm-hmm. And Georgina is Grandma Armitage in that woman's body. And I guess kind of speaking of that kind of rolls us into that whole sequence with the armchair with Chris and the cotton. And do you want to explain what the symbolism or you suppose you already explained what some of the symbolism is, but how the cotton, he used that to plug his ears so he wouldn't be able to hear the suggestions. But I guess in that same sequence is where we see that stuffed deer head mounted above the TV. And the final way that deer comes into play is kind of a neat turnaround in the whole Dean thinking all deer should be killed moment, because when Chris finally does manage to escape that chair, he takes that mounted deer head off the wall and uses it to kill Dean. So
poetic justice.
Dean is now killed by the thing he thinks should all be eliminated, be that either symbolically as him having the stand-in of deer for black people, or just taking it on a face statement of him wanting all deer eradicated. Now he's being eradicated by a deer. That
actually brings me to an interesting point. The film is really kind of fun to watch because you can watch it twice and you can get two completely different perspectives.
Right.
For example, Chris is being nagged about the cigarettes.
Right.
And you're like, why do they keep nagging him about the cigarettes? It's so weird.
Constantly with the cigarettes and the smoking, even though he hasn't smoked since he's been there.
And it's his prerogative. Yeah. His body. You think it's his body.
We're non-smokers, but people
it's your body.
If people want to step outside of our home and have a smoke, that's their business.
Yeah. But that's the issue, right? Is it's not his body. It's their body. Yeah. At least in their minds.
They're claiming it.
They're claiming his body. So it makes sense after you've seen the movie, you go to watch it again, you're like, oh, so they're just nagging him about the cigarettes because
he's ruining his body.
Because he's ruining his body.
Yeah.
And then there's another whole scene where he's being like paraded around under the guise of being introduced to all of these friends.
Yeah, at the party when all the old wealthy white people show up.
Yeah, all the old wealthy white people show up. And he talks to one guy about golf. And he's like, how's your swing? Here, do it for me so I can see it. And you're like, that's so weird.
Yeah, it's weird to show off your golf swing.
Yeah, okay.
Gordon loves Tiger.
Oh, best I've ever seen, ever. Hands down. So, Chris, let's see your form.
And then there's another woman who's got, her husband's in a wheelchair and she's like a cougar kind of, and she's like talking about sex and like
feeling Chris's arm.
Feeling his arm. Yeah, it got kind of awkward. And we're like, okay.
Asking Rose if the sex is that good.
So, is it true? Is it better?
Wow.
Yeah. So, when you watch it the first time, you're like, okay, so there's all that underlying racism that you see at these white parties. Like all that underlying icky.
Yeah, the people who just have no understanding of
Why would you
socially
say
nice.
that,
Yeah.
man? That's so weird.
Fair skin has been in favor for the past, couple of hundreds of years. But now the pendulum is swung back. Black is in fashion.
You watch it again, though, and you're like, oh.
It all clicks now.
They're all trying to bid on Chris.
Yep.
So that auction scene we talked about earlier is them all bidding. The highest bidder gets to have Chris's body, and so you translate your brain into his body.
Yeah.
So that whole thing is just them deciding if they want to spend the money on that body.
Which very much like black slavery in America. The auctions to own black people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that group, it's called the Order of the Coagula.
Yeah.
And basically perform brain surgery on black people in order to take over their bodies.
Yeah, they put a white mind in a black person's body.
Yeah. And it's kind of an equally offensive notion when you look at the inspiration that they took from the Stepford Wives, which was an organization about the men's association who murder their wives and make them into androids.
Yeah.
So, he really pulled a lot of, and Rosemary's Baby was a very similar concept as well.
A cult who uses Rosemary against her will to be a vessel for the baby of Satan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, he really wanted to take those concepts, but instead of using them in a sexism way, in a racism way.
Yeah, exactly. It's
which hasn't been done much.
No, and it's a good way to turn it for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I did mention that they are the Order of the Coagula, I think it was called.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
There's a scene where Chris is watching that TV.
Mm-hmm.
Originally it was supposed to be a scene where he's listening to the song by James Taylor, You've Got a Friend, over and over, but he couldn't get the rights to it and it was too expensive. So they came up with this video instead, which Peele ended up preferring the video over the other idea anyways.
Thinking about it now, I don't think that would have fit as well as this really did.
Yeah. He said that part of the inspiration for that idea came from the TV show Lost.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They had these videos called the Dharma Initiative videos. And he said it kind of gives you that same feeling. There's also a scene in The Matrix where Morpheus explains the truth about reality to Nemo.
Oh, sure.
To Nemo. To Neo. So he said those are kind of the things he pulled from those movies to come up with this idea. And he said, oh my God, there's this produced thing. It goes so deep. We're just hitting the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
You watching this and you're like, shit, this is deep.
Yeah.
Because they've got a whole produced video. And who's the guy that's in the video? It's the grandfather.
It's Grandpa Armitage.
Grandpa Armitage. His brain is transplanted into
Walter.
So this it's like it gets crazy at the end.
Together.
It gets so crazy at the end.
Not to sidetrack us too much, but I really do, desperately, I want to see a Pixar take on The Matrix now. I definitely want to see Nemo as Neo.
All right, that's enough.
I know Kung Fu. So silliness aside, Jordan Peele originally had a pretty depressing ending in mind for this film. He was seeing a lot of society's reaction to the police brutality that had suddenly broiled to the surface finally and become widely shown in the media for society at large to see and observe versus just being swept under the rug. And Jordan felt that this was a hopeful turn, I guess. So he felt that the depressing ending no longer fit for the film. So he wanted to give a happier ending to the audience.
When he tested it, he said it just sucked the air out of the room. You could almost feel it.
Yeah.
It was sad.
So,
they named that ending The Sad Truce for a reason.
The original ending ended with, instead of Rod showing up in the final confrontation when Chris was escaping and Chris essentially killing the entire Armitage family, instead of Rod showing up at the last minute to whisk Chris away to safety, it was the police.
Actual police.
They show up in the middle of him strangling Rose in the middle of the street.
It's a bad look. It's a bad look.
Yeah, real bad look. And of course, Chris is arrested and taken to prison.
But it's a look that you feel like you've seen in the media before, which is probably why it didn't do so great. Yeah.
Even though we, as the audience, we know exactly what he went
What
through.
happened.
And in my opinion, is justified for what he did.
No kidding.
But of course, the police don't see it that way.
Right.
So it then cuts to a scene with Rod coming to visit Chris in prison. And Rod, of course, asks him how he's doing. But then he says, if you can just remember some names, if you can give me some names. And Chris admits to not being able to recall any additional names or even know any other names. And Rod just keeps insisting, we just need to track down the rest of these people. And Chris insists. He stops Rod and says, I stopped them. And that's all he really says. And he hangs up the prisoner's phone and just walks back to his cell. I mean, that's really a depressing ending.
Yeah. And, you're right in saying that before, when we were in the Obama era, that ending may have been okay, but we weren't in that era anymore.
No.
And I think that racism, while it's always been, it's never gone away.
No.
It was feeling, the atmosphere was feeling better, hopeful. And with the Obama era over, that ending just didn't work anymore because the fear was greater than it ever has been,
there were some high-powered social instigators at that time.
Gee.
Well, now that we're all thoroughly depressed.
I have one more.
You have one more?
One more small, tasty tidbit.
Something that's going to give us a little more levity?
Yeah,
maybe?
it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's totally out of the realm of anything we've talked about. It's really kind of just like a one-off, like, oh, that's interesting kind of a thing.
Lay it on us.
So there's a lecturer in the Department of African American Studies at UCLA.
Okay.
Name's, I might murder it here because it's a hard name. Tanarive Due.
Okay.
Tanarive Due. They came up with a class. They tweeted about it to see like if they could get, people interested in it.
Sure.
But it was called Sunken Place, Racism, Survival, and Black Horror Aesthetic. That's what the class is called.
All right.
By the way, I want to go to that class. It sounds amazing.
It does sound amazing.
But they ended up having the class and students were signed up for it. And during one of the classes, they were watching the scene with, before I tell you what scene they were watching, Jordan Peele actually reached out to this lecturer and was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I showed up at one of the classes and like surprised them? And the lecturer was like, yeah, that'd be really funny, and whatever. And it kind of ended there.
Sure.
So they were watching the scene where Rose is holding up the keys and revealing she's in the scheme to get him there.
Right. Various.
Yeah. The lights come on. Lecturer asks the class, quote, what do you think the director was trying to say about the coveting of Black bodies? And then Jordan Peele stands up in the back row and he says, I have a question. And I guess the whole class went crazy. And there's a small video of it online. You can watch it.
Okay.
But I thought that was really cute that he went out of his way to go to this class, just to be Jordan.
Yeah. Well, and to give insight into his feelings, his emotion, what the film was trying to convey, to give these people, these students, a real genuine answer.
Yeah. And, that just shows you what kind of impact this film has had on like the Black community in general. They're making classes, lecturers are creating classes around this. I read a couple, I didn't read the whole thing, but I kind of skimmed through them. But there's a couple of college graduates that have written their theses on this movie.
Sure.
Basically, not just the movie, but like, what it means to society, some of the symbology and
the impact.
I think to say that he did a good job on this film is not giving it enough credit.
He made something special.
He really did, yeah. Even if you don't like horror films, though, this is a film you should watch.
Yeah.
My mother, notoriously hates horror films.
Not into horror.
Scares the bejesus out of her. She hates them. She watched this film.
She
did. While it did jump scare her a couple times, just because she's very easily She's easily jump scared, let's be honest. She watched the whole movie and she really enjoyed it. So I think even if you're not into horror films or dramas, you should still see this film.
Yeah.
It's that good.
As your mom said, if it were up to her, she, if she would have seen or read about this film as an option to watch, she would have just passed it by.
Pass. Because it's a quote unquote, it's in the horror genre.
But we had happened to put it on and she was here to watch it and
just loved it.
So I think it's time we close up the lobby once more.
I guess.
Yeah, I know. A little bit disappointing.
It's pretty bittersweet.
Yeah.
We had a good conversation today.
We did.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, very
Mhm.
informative, but it is getting late.
Mhm.
And hold on. I left my phone on vibrate. I didn't put it on.
Brian, you explicitly
didn't turn it
told
off.
me to put mine on
I
silent.
know. I messed up. Do that from time. But
is it a helpful one at least?
I mean, it is the friend I texted before to house sit for us to
right,
get
right,
back to
right.
me. So I'm just going to check the
Yep,
message.
okay, yep,
I know
mhm,
I shouldn't,
yep.
but I'm going to real quick. Crap. Leia, our friend can't sit for us.
Oh, well, I have an idea.
What you got?
I think my mother could come and take care of the house.
Brilliant. I
Yep.
love it.
She's not a TSA agent,
Not a TSA agent. So
but I'm pretty sure she can handle shit.
yeah, she is. She is also well renowned for handling shit, just
Yes.
like the TSA.
Just like the TSA.
So yeah, no, that'd be perfect. Do you want to call her or should I?
I'll call her. She's my mother. I got other things
Yeah,
to talk to her about.
It's
You
for
know.
the best. And
Yeah.
I hate talking on the phone anyway. So yeah, our friends have been sitting here long enough in their chairs, but let's let them get on with their day.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. And if you want to interact with the show beyond just listening to us, you can contact the show at themovietheaterlobby@gmail.com or our website at themovietheaterlobby.com. Plus, find the show at Facebook and YouTube at The Movie Theater Lobby or Instagram at The Movie Lobby, since The Movie Theater Lobby was too long for Instagram. For me personally, you can find me, Brandon McLeavy, on Facebook with the Frosty Beverage profile pic. And as a little extra added help in finding me, it's McAleavey. Or find me much more easily on Instagram at BrandJNRP.
And more importantly,
More important? What's more important?
you
than
can find me,
Oh.
Leah McLeavy,
Of course.
at LM Nerd Room on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, you're right. That's more important. I agree with you. But one last thing. Everyone asked for it, so we will too. Please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, wherever you're listening to.
Wherever you're listening to right now.
Wherever you're hearing our fine voices. Give us some stars and reviews.
Sounds good.
So, Leah, thank you again for episode 2. It was an absolute delight.
Thank you, Brandon.
Hopefully it was for all of you listening. And we will see you next week at the Movie Theater Lobby.
Then he sent me some weird picture, and I'm like, oh, man, that's Andre Haysworth. This dude been missing for 6 months, right? So I do all my research, because as a TSA agent, you guys are detectives. I got the same training, we might know more than y'all sometimes, because we dealing with some terrorist shit. So, but that's a totally different story.